You are watching a man's career, reputation, and life fall apart in real time. You just don't know whose yet. On a quiet afternoon, Officer Harlan Beck made a decision every cop fears. He chose the wrong target. He saw a black man in a luxury car and assumed he was a criminal. He had no idea he was staring at one of the FBI's most decorated agents, Special Agent Everett Cole. What happens next is not just a misunderstanding. It is a brutal collision of ego and justice that ends with a twist so shocking it brought an entire police department to its knees. Watch closely. The hunter is about to become the hunted. The engine of the black Chevy Tahoe ticked softly as it cooled, the only sound in the otherwise silent cul-de-sac of Oak Creek Sycamore Drive. It was an affluent neighborhood, manicured lawns cut with geometric precision, American flags drooping lazily on porch poles, and the kind of silence that cost $500,000 to buy. Inside the Tahoe, Everett Cole sat with the stillness of a predator waiting for the wind to change. He adjusted the cuffs of his suit jacket, Italian wool tailored to hide the Sig Sauer P226 holstered under his left arm. On the passenger seat lay a folder stamped Confidential, a lukewarm cup of coffee, and a pair of high-powered binoculars. Everett, known as Jay to the very few friends he kept outside the bureau, checked his watch. He wasn't here for a drug bust or a bank robbery. He was here for something much harder to prove. White-collar corruption involving city zoning permits, organized crime, and money laundering. The target was a man named Reginald Shaw, a city councilman living 3 doors down. Jay was a man in his 40s with skin the color of deep mahogany and a shaved head that gleamed slightly in the filtered sunlight. He had spent over a decade in the FBI, moving from the chaotic gang task forces of Chicago to the surgically precise white-collar crimes division. He knew how to wait. Patience was the primary weapon of his trade. He took a sip of the coffee, grimacing at the temperature, and scanned the street. A delivery truck rumbled past. A woman walked a golden retriever. Normal, boring, perfect. Then the rearview mirror caught a flash of white and blue. A police cruiser, Unit 402 of the Oak Creek Police Department, turned slowly onto the street. It didn't pass. It crawled. The shark-like nose of the Ford Explorer dipped as the brakes engaged, coming to a halt 2 car lengths behind Jay's Tahoe. Jay let out a long, weary sigh through his nose. He knew the drill. He was a black man sitting in a tinted SUV in a neighborhood where the demographics skewed heavily white. He had hoped the generic government plates would be enough of a "Do Not Disturb" sign, but apparently today was going to be complicated. He watched the mirrors. The cruiser's doors opened. 2 officers. The driver was a wall of a man. Officer Harlan Beck. Jay didn't know his name yet, but he knew the type. Beck walked with his chest puffed out, thumbs hooked near his belt, his sunglasses reflecting the suburban glare. He was heavy-set but muscular, with a thick mustache that looked like it belonged in another era. His body language screamed territorial aggression. The passenger was younger, female, Officer Lena Harper. She looked like she was barely out of the academy, her uniform slightly too big, her hand resting nervously near her radio. She trailed Beck by a few steps, glancing around the street as if expecting an ambush. "Here we go," Jay whispered to himself. He kept his hands visible, resting them at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. He lowered the driver's side window as Beck approached. Beck didn't say hello. He didn't ask how Jay was doing. He leaned down, placing a meaty hand on the roof of the Tahoe, and peered inside through his aviators. "License and registration," Beck barked, no preamble. Jay turned his head slowly. He kept his voice calm, the practiced baritone of a man who had negotiated with hostage takers. "Good afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" "I said license and registration," Beck repeated, louder this time. He leaned in further, sniffing the air inside the car like a bloodhound. "You don't live here." "I'm working," Jay said calmly. "I'm a federal agent. My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket. I'm going to reach for them now." This was the protocol. Declare, describe, move. Don't you move a muscle. Beck's hand dropped to his holster. The snap of the retention strap being thumbed off echoed in the quiet street. "I didn't ask for a life story. I asked for ID. Get out of the car." Jay frowned. This was escalating faster than usual. "Officer, I am identifying myself as a special agent with the FBI. I am on an active surveillance operation. If I get out of the car, I break cover." "Break cover?" Beck laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You're sitting in a suspicious vehicle in a high-priority neighborhood, idling. We've had reports of break-ins. You fit the description." Jay knew for a fact there had been no break-ins in this zip code for quite some time. He checked the crime stats regularly. "Which description is that, officer?" "The one that says black male in a car." Beck's face reddened instantly. The vein in his neck bulged. He ripped the door handle. It was locked. "Open this door or I break the window," Beck shouted. Officer Harper stepped forward tentatively. "Harlan, maybe let him show the ID first. He said he's a Fed." "Shut up, Harper," Beck snapped without looking at her. "He's stalling. He's probably ditching dope or a piece right now. Open the door." Jay calculated his options. If he refused, Beck would smash the window, drag him out, and the scene would be even bigger. If he complied, he lost control of the situation. But he saved the taxpayer the cost of a window and potentially saved his own life if Beck was as trigger-happy as he looked. "Okay," Jay said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming cold and hard. "I am unlocking the door. I am stepping out. But you need to listen very carefully to what I tell you next. Get out." Jay unlocked the door. Before he could even swing it fully open, Beck grabbed him by the lapel of his expensive suit and yanked. Jay stumbled as he was hauled onto the asphalt. He was tall and in peak physical condition, a former college linebacker, but he allowed himself to be moved. Resistance now would give Beck the excuse he was desperately fishing for. "Hands on the hood now." Beck slammed Jay against the hot metal of the Tahoe. The impact rattled Jay's teeth, but he didn't grunt. He spread his legs and placed his hands on the roof, fingers spread. "My badge," Jay said clearly, speaking loud enough for the body cam on Beck's chest to pick it up perfectly, "is in my left interior pocket. My service weapon is holstered under my left arm. Do not reach for it unless you want a federal inquiry on your desk by morning." "Gun!" Beck shouted, ignoring the context. "He's got a gun. Harper, cover me." Harper drew her weapon but pointed it low, looking terrified. "Harlan, he told you he has it. He's complying. He's armed and dangerous." Beck jammed his knee into the back of Jay's knee, forcing him to buckle. Jay went down to one knee, grit biting into his suit trousers. Beck grabbed Jay's right wrist and twisted it behind his back, forcing it up near his shoulder blades. The pain was sharp, rotator cuff tearing sharp. Jay gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowing. "Officer Beck," Jay said, reading the nameplate now that it was inches from his face. "You are making a mistake that you cannot fix. Check my pocket. Look at the credentials. I'm checking for my safety first." Beck patted Jay down aggressively. He found the gun. He ripped the Sig Sauer from the holster and skidded it across the pavement, scratching the finish of a government-issued firearm. "That is federal property," Jay stated. His voice was becoming robotic, detached. He was memorizing every second. Excessive force, failure to verify credentials, unlawful detention. Beck finally reached into the jacket pocket. He pulled out the leather wallet. He flipped it open. The gold shield of the FBI gleamed in the sunlight. The photo ID next to it clearly read, "Everett Cole, Special Agent." Beck stared at it. For a second, just one heartbeat, the silence returned. Harper leaned in. Seeing the badge, her eyes went wide. "Harlan," she whispered, "that's real. That's a real badge. Let him up." But Beck's ego was a runaway train. He had already committed. He had shouted. He had used force. And neighbours were starting to come out onto their porches. Mrs. Harrington from number 42 was holding her iPhone up. A landscaping crew across the street had stopped their mowers and were watching. If Beck backed down now, he looked like a fool. If he doubled down, he could claim the badge looked fake. He could claim Jay was resisting. In Beck's mind, the truth was malleable. Beck snapped the wallet shut and shoved it into his own pocket. "Fake," Beck announced loud enough for the neighbours to hear. "Looks like a forgery to me. You get these online." Jay's blood ran cold. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was malice. "You know that is legitimate. Call your supervisor. Call the field office. The number is on the back of the card." "I'm taking you in for impersonating a police officer, resisting arrest, and possession of an illegal firearm," Beck said, pulling his handcuffs. Click, click. The steel bit into Jay's wrists. "You are under arrest," Beck sneered, leaning close to Jay's ear. "You think a suit and a fake badge make you untouchable? Not in my town, boy." The racial undertone wasn't subtle. It was a sledgehammer. Jay stood up as Beck hauled him by the chain of the cuffs. He turned to face the officer. Jay didn't look defeated. He looked like a judge passing a sentence. "Officer Harper," Jay said, locking eyes with the rookie, "you are witnessing a felony. Deprivation of rights under colour of law, Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. If you do not intervene, you are an accessory." Harper flinched. She looked at Beck. "Harlan, we should run the badge number. Dispatch can verify it quickly." "I said get him in the car." Beck shoved Jay toward the cruiser. Jay didn't fight. He walked with dignity, despite his hands being bound behind him. He sat in the back of the cramped plastic seat of the police interceptor. The smell of stale vomit and disinfectant filled his nose. Beck slammed the door. Inside the car, trapped behind the cage, Jay took a deep breath. He closed his eyes. He wasn't praying. He was counting. He knew something the officer didn't. Jay wasn't just on a stakeout. He was part of a coordinated takedown. His partner, Special Agent Nolan Pierce, was 2 streets over in a surveillance van, and Jay was wearing a wire. Everything that had just happened, the racial slur, the dismissal of the badge, the refusal to check credentials, had been recorded and transmitted live to the Chicago field office. Jay looked at the digital clock on the dashboard of the cruiser. "Nolan, come get me and bring the cavalry," Jay whispered, knowing the microphone taped to his chest beneath his shirt would pick it up. Outside, Beck was strutting. He was playing to the audience. He walked over to Mrs. Harrington, who was still filming. "Nothing to see here, folks. Just taking some trash off the street," Beck boomed. He picked up Jay's gun from the pavement, handling it carelessly by the trigger guard, a massive safety violation, and tossed it onto the passenger seat of his cruiser. He turned to Harper. "You drive. I'll write up the booking sheet on the way. We're going to charge him with everything we can think of. Disorderly conduct, assault on an officer." "He didn't touch you, Harlan," Harper said, her voice trembling. He thought about it. Beck grunted. "Get in." They got into the car. Beck turned around, grinning at Jay through the cage. "Comfortable back there? Don't worry. The county lockup is worse." Jay looked at him, his face completely expressionless. "You don't have much time left, officer." "Much time until what?" Beck laughed. "Until your life ends," Jay said softly. "Not your heartbeat, but your life as you know it." Beck rolled his eyes. Yeah. Tell it to the judge." He slapped the dashboard. "Let's go, Harper." Harper put the car in drive. She released the brake, but before she could touch the gas, a siren chirped. Not the wail of a distant ambulance, the sharp, aggressive whoop-whoop of a federal siren. A massive black SUV, identical to Jay's, but with grille lights flashing red and blue, squealed around the corner, blocking the street in front of them. Then another came from behind, boxing them in. Then a third. Tires screeched. Doors flew open. Men in tactical gear, with FBI emblazoned in bright yellow on their backs, poured out. They didn't look like local cops. They moved with the terrifying speed of a SWAT team. Beck froze. His hand went to his door handle, but he didn't open it. "What is this?" he stammered. "Who are these guys?" Jay leaned forward against the cage. A small, cold smile finally touched his lips. "That," Jay said, "is the twist." The silence of Sycamore Drive, previously disturbed only by the chirping of birds and the drone of lawn mowers, was now annihilated by a cacophony of shouting, slamming doors and the crackle of high-frequency radios. Officer Harlan Beck sat frozen in the driver's seat of his cruiser. His brain, usually quick to categorize the world into threat or civilian, was misfiring. The visual data in front of him didn't make sense. Police officers were the predators in this ecosystem, not the prey. Yet 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans had just executed a hard-box maneuver on his vehicle, a tactic usually reserved for terrorists or cartel leaders. "Harlan!" Officer Lena Harper's voice was high, bordering on hysterical. "Harlan, put the car in park. Put your hands up." "Shut up," Beck hissed, though his voice lacked its usual venom. It was thin, greedy. "It's a mistake or a prank. Probably a movie shoot. They didn't have permits for this." He was clinging to delusion like a life raft. "Driver of the police cruiser," a voice boomed over a PA system from the lead SUV. It wasn't a request. It was the voice of authority. "Turn off the engine. Throw the keys out the window. Keep your hands visible." Inside the cage of the cruiser, Everett Cole watched the back of Beck's neck. He saw the sweat beginning to bead at the hairline. "I'd listen to them, Harlan," Jay said calmly. "That's Special Agent Nolan Pierce on the horn. He has a very low tolerance for nonsense." Beck whipped his head around, his face purple. "You set me up." "You set this up." "I tried to show you my ID," Jay replied. "You chose not to look." "Driver now!" The PA system boomed again. Beck's hands shook as he reached for the ignition. He turned the key. The engine died. He dropped the keys out of the window. They clattered onto the asphalt. Exit the vehicle. Walk backwards toward the sound of my voice. Hands on your head. Beck opened the door. The heat of the afternoon hit him, but he felt cold. He stepped out. He looked to his left and right. There were at least a dozen agents. They wore heavy plate carriers over navy blue fatigues. They held M4 carbines at the low ready, barrels pointed at the ground, but ready to snap up in a millisecond. These weren't beat cops. These were the FBI's regional SWAT team, the heavy hitters called in for high-risk warrants. Beck interlaced his fingers behind his head. He started walking backward. "Officer Beck!" A voice spoke from behind him. Not over a PA this time, but close. "Stop. Get on your knees." "I'm a police officer," Beck shouted, finding a scrap of his old bravado. "You can't do this. I have a badge. Get on your knees, or you will be put on your knees." Beck crumbled. He sank to the asphalt, the gravel biting into his uniform pants. 2 agents moved in. They didn't treat him with the professional courtesy usually extended between law enforcement agencies. They treated him like a hostile combatant. One agent grabbed Beck's left wrist, the other his right. They wrenched his arms down and slapped a pair of flex cuffs, heavy-duty plastic zip ties, onto his wrists. "Hey, that's too tight," Beck yelped. "Quiet," the agent on his right growled. Meanwhile, a different team moved to the passenger side. Officer Harper was already out of the car, crying, her hands high in the air. "I didn't do anything," she sobbed. I told him to check the badge." "Secure her," a tall agent commanded. "Check her weapon. Is it clear?" "Clear," another agent shouted, removing Harper's sidearm. They didn't cuff her, but they escorted her away from Beck, separating the witnesses. Then the focus shifted to the back seat of the cruiser. The tall agent, Nolan Pierce, approached the rear door. He had red hair that was greying at the temples and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He didn't look happy. He looked apocalyptic. He opened the rear door. "You okay, Jay?" Pierce asked, his voice instantly shifting from command shout to that of a concerned friend. Jay shifted in the plastic seat, offering his back to the door so Pierce could reach the handcuffs. "Shoulders a bit tight. He wrenched it pretty good. But I'm fine." "Key," Pierce barked over his shoulder. An agent handed him a universal handcuff key. Pierce unlocked the cuffs. Jay stepped out of the cruiser. He rubbed his wrists where red welts were already forming. He adjusted his suit jacket, brushed a speck of dust off his lapel, and took a deep breath of fresh air. He walked over to where Beck was kneeling. The scene was a tableau of humiliation. Beck, the king of his little patrol beat, was now kneeling before the man he had called boy moments ago. Jay looked down at him. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just looked disappointed. "Officer Beck," Jay said, "I am Special Agent Everett Cole. I am the lead investigator on the RICO case targeting the corrupt zoning operations in this district. You have just compromised a long-running federal investigation." Beck looked up, blinking against the sun. "RICO, what are you talking about? You were just sitting there." "I was waiting for a courier to deliver a package of cash to Councilman Shaw," Jay said, pointing to the house 3 doors down. "A courier who just drove past us while you were screaming about my registration." Beck's face went pale. "I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a shield for incompetence," Jay said, "and it certainly isn't a shield for civil rights violations." A black sedan pulled up to the perimeter. The door opened and a man in a charcoal suit stepped out. He moved with the weight of authority that made even the SWAT teams straighten up. "That's the ASAC," Pierce whispered to Jay. "Assistant Special Agent in Charge Vale." He was listening to the wire. ASAC Gideon Vale walked straight past the SWAT team, past Harper, and stopped in front of Beck. Vale was a small man with glasses, but his eyes were like lasers. "Get him up," Vale ordered the agents. They hauled Beck to his feet. Vale leaned in close. "Officer, in my years with the Bureau, I have heard many things on a wire. But what I heard you say to Agent Cole today, that was special. That was a career-ending performance." "He resisted," Beck sputtered, trying to lie one more time. "He refused to exit." Vale reached into his pocket and pulled out a digital recorder. He pressed a button. Beck's voice. "You don't live here. You fit the description. Open this door, or I break the window." Jay's voice. "I'm a federal agent. My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket." Beck's voice. "I didn't ask for a life story. Get out." Vale stopped the recording. He identified himself immediately. "You escalated immediately." And then Vale pressed the button again. Beck's voice. "Not in my town, boy." The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. The neighbors were all watching now. Mrs. Harrington was still filming. The landscaping crew had moved closer. Beck realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that the audio wasn't just on Vale's recorder. It was likely on Jay's body wire, his own body camera, if he hadn't conveniently forgotten to turn it on, and potentially recorded by the neighbors. "You are going to be processed," Vale said coldly, "but not by your department. We are taking custody of you under federal statute." "You can't arrest a cop for doing his job," Beck screamed, struggling against the flex cuffs. "I have qualified immunity." Jay stepped forward. "Qualified immunity protects officials who make reasonable mistakes in the line of duty. It does not protect those who knowingly violate constitutional rights. You saw the badge. You called it fake without verification. That is malice, Harlan. That pierces the veil of immunity." "Officer Harper," Vale called out. Harper jumped. "Yes, sir." "You suggested running the badge," Vale said. "We heard that on the wire. You tried to de-escalate." "I tried. He wouldn't listen," Harper stammered. "That fact is the only reason you aren't in cuffs right now," Vale said. "But you are going to write a statement. A very long, very detailed statement. And if you leave out a single detail, you will go down with him. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Absolutely, sir." Beck looked at his partner. "Lena, don't tell them anything. Union rep. Call the union rep." Harper looked at Beck. She looked at the FBI agents. She looked at Jay, the man she had almost watched get beaten. "Shut up, Harlan," she said quietly. The processing of the scene took time. Sycamore Drive was cordoned off with yellow tape that read "Federal Crime Scene," which confused the local residents who were used to seeing the blue and white tape of the Oak Creek PD. Beck had been placed in the back of one of the Suburbans, isolated, air conditioning off. He was sweating, stewing, and waiting. Outside, the dynamic was shifting from tactical to legal. Jay stood by the hood of his Tahoe, drinking a bottle of water Pierce had given him. His shoulder throbbed, and he knew he'd have a massive bruise the next day, but the adrenaline kept the pain distant. "So," Pierce said, leaning against the fender. "The courier's gone," Jay said, shaking his head. "Saw the lights, saw the cruiser. Probably turned around a few blocks back. Sure won't get the money today. He'll get spooked. He might start shredding documents." "We can get a warrant for Shaw's place based on the wiretap we already have," Pierce suggested. "It's messy, but we might salvage it." "Maybe," Jay said. He looked at the police cruiser still parked crookedly in the street. "But right now, I'm more interested in what we found in Beck's car." "You mean besides your gun?" "I mean the laptop," Jay said. "When he was running my plates, I saw something on his screen. It wasn't the standard NCIC database." Pierce frowned. "What was it?" "It looked like a private messaging board, something encrypted. He didn't close it when he jumped out." Pierce flagged down a tech agent. "Get the data off the cruiser's laptop. Clone it now." While the tech team went to work, a new vehicle arrived. It was a standard Oak Creek police chief's car. Chief Elias Thorne was a man in his later years, trying desperately to hold on to a job that was rapidly becoming too complex for him. He walked under the yellow tape, looking like he was walking to his own execution. He approached ASAC Vale and Jay. "Agent Vale," Thorne said, extending a hand that Vale ignored. "I got the call. I can't believe this." "Believe it, Chief," Vale said. "Your officer assaulted an agent. I'm sure it was a misunderstanding." Thorne tried, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "Harlan Beck is a veteran. He's old school, maybe a bit rough, but he gets results." "Old school?" Jay spoke up. He stepped out from behind Vale. Chief Thorne looked at Jay. He saw the dust on the suit, the red marks on the wrists. "This is Agent Cole," Vale introduced. "Chief," Jay said, "your old school officer profiled me, assaulted me, and illegally detained me. But here is the part that is going to interest you." Jay pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a printout the tech agent had just handed him. "We just pulled the logs from Beck's onboard computer," Jay said. "You know how you guys are supposed to run plates through the state database?" "Of course," Thorne said. "Beck didn't run my plate through the state database," Jay said. "He ran it through a private Discord server." Thorne blinked. "A what?" "A chat room," Jay explained. "A private group called the Blue Wall. He posted my plate number and a photo of me sitting in the car. He asked the group, got a bogey at 4002 Sycamore. Black guy in a nice car messing with the neighborhood. Green light to harass." Thorne's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jay continued, his voice hardening. Someone replied, a user named Watchman. The reply was, "Light him up, make him run." Jay stepped closer to the chief. "This wasn't just a bad stop, Chief. This was coordinated gang activity operating inside your department. Beck wasn't checking for warrants. He was checking with his friends if he could have some fun." The implications were nuclear. It meant Beck wasn't a lone wolf. It meant there was a cell of officers in Oak Creek and maybe other departments sharing targets, encouraging harassment, and bypassing legal protocols. "This is impossible," Thorne whispered. "It's about to be national news," Vale said. "We are seizing all servers at your precinct. We are seizing all personal devices of officers on that shift. And we are opening a pattern or practice investigation into the Oak Creek Police Department immediately." Thorne looked at Beck, who was watching from the window of the Suburban. The chief's face went from shock to fury. He realized his department was about to be gutted because one man couldn't suppress his ego for a few moments. "Can I speak to him?" Thorne asked. "No," Vale said. "He is a federal prisoner. You can speak to his lawyer if he can find one." At that moment, a sleek silver Mercedes pulled up to the perimeter. A man in a sharp navy suit got out. He carried a leather briefcase and walked with the confident stride of a man who charged a high hourly rate. "That," Jay said, checking his watch, "would be the lawyer." It was Donovan Price. The Donovan Price. He was a defense attorney, known for taking high-profile cases involving police misconduct, usually defending the cops. He was the go-to fixer for the Fraternal Order of Police. Price ducked under the tape, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Gentlemen, quite a party. I represent Officer Beck. I demand to see my client immediately." Vale blocked his path. "Mr. Price, you're fast." "I have a retainer with the union," Price said smoothly. "Now, I understand there was friction between agencies. Let's not blow this out of proportion. My client made a judgment call. We can discuss an apology, perhaps a dropped charge." Jay laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Mr. Price," Jay said, "your client is currently detained under federal statutes for assault on a federal officer, and we are currently drafting charges for conspiracy to violate civil rights based on digital evidence we just seized." Price paused. He looked at Jay, then at the tech agents cloning the laptop. The smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Conspiracy?" Price asked, his voice losing its lilt. "That's a reach, agent." "Is it?" Jay held up the printout of the chat log. He solicited instructions on whether to harass a citizen based on race from a private network. That is conspiracy. And since I am a federal agent, that makes it a conspiracy to impede a federal investigation. Price snatched the paper. He read it. His eyes narrowed. He was a shark, and he had just realized there was blood in the water. But it was his client's blood. "I need a moment with him," Price said, his tone serious now. "You can have a moment," Vale said, "with an agent present." "Attorney-client privilege," Price snapped. "Not when the device used to commit the crime is still in the car he's sitting in," Vale countered. "We are securing the scene. You can shout at him through the window." Price walked over to the Suburban. Beck saw him and started pounding on the glass. "Get me out of here, Price. They broke my wrist. They kidnapped me." Price gestured for the agent to roll the window down a few inches. "Harlan," Price said, his voice low and hard. "Shut up." "What?" "You're supposed to help me." "I can't help you if you keep talking," Price hissed. "They have the chat logs, Harlan. They have the blue wall chats." Beck stopped pounding. The colour drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. They looked at the laptop. "Yes," Price said. "And because of that, this isn't a traffic stop anymore. It's a major case against you." Beck slumped back against the seat. "But Watchman told me to—" Price closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Did you just identify a co-conspirator while a federal agent is standing right there holding a recorder?" The agent standing guard smiled pleasantly. "I'm done," Price said, stepping back. "I need to make some calls. I need to see if the union will even cover this. Intentional criminal conspiracy usually voids your coverage, Harlan." "You can't leave me," Beck screamed as Price walked away. Jay watched the lawyer retreat. He turned to Pierce. "You know what the worst part is?" "What?" "If he had just checked the badge," Jay said, "I would have let him go with a warning. He would be home eating dinner in no time. Now he's going to prison for a long time." "Calamity," Pierce said, spitting on the ground. "We aren't done yet," Jay said, looking down the street at Councilman Shaw's house. The lights in the councilman's house had just turned off. "The big fish is trying to run. Beck was just the appetizer." Jay tapped his earpiece. "Tactical. This is Cole. We are pivoting. The primary target, Shaw, is likely destroying evidence. We have probable cause based on the exigent circumstances created by the compromised surveillance. We are moving on the house now." "Copy that." The radio crackled. Jay looked at Beck one last time. "Sit tight, officer. The show is just starting." The transition from a standoff on the street to a full-scale federal raid happened with the terrifying precision of a thunderclap. For Harlan Beck, sitting handcuffed in the back of the FBI Suburban, the world had turned into a surreal nightmare. He watched through the tinted glass as the tactical team reformed. They weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at the house at the end of Sycamore Drive, the home of Councilman Reginald Shaw. Beck had waved at Shaw just the day before. He had told the neighborhood watch meetings that Shaw was a pillar of the community. He had spent years patrolling this street, effectively acting as Shaw's unpaid private security guard, chasing off suspicious cars to keep the councilman happy. Now he watched as Special Agent Everett Cole, the man Beck had tried to humiliate, donned a heavy ballistic vest with FBI in bold yellow letters. Cole moved with a fluidity that Beck, with his stiff back and bad knees, had never possessed. "Breaching tools up," Jay commanded, his voice clear over the radio frequency that Beck could faintly hear from the front seat of the Suburban. "Shaw is spooked. If he destroys the ledger, we lose the cartel connection. We go hard. We go fast." The team moved up the driveway. Beck felt a sick feeling in his stomach. Cartel connection. Shaw was just a zoning guy. He approved strip malls. What was the FBI talking about? "Stack up," Jay ordered. 6 agents lined up against the pristine white siding of Shaw's colonial mansion. Pierce was on the ram. "FBI search warrant," Jay bellowed. His voice was a weapon, projecting deep and loud, shaking the windows. "Open the door." Silence. "Hit it." Crack. The sound of the battering ram, splintering the solid oak door, was sickeningly loud. It took one swing. The door flew inward. "Go, go, go!" Beck watched the agents flood into the house. He saw the flash of tactical lights sweeping the foyer. He heard shouting, muffled by the walls, but unmistakable in its intensity. Inside the house, chaos reigned. Jay moved through the hallway, his weapon raised. "Federal agents, show me your hands." A maid screamed and dropped to the floor in the kitchen. "Secure her. Keep moving." Jay signaled to the rear of the house toward the study. That was where the shredder would be. They reached the double doors of the study. They were locked. "Nolan, take it." Pierce didn't use the ram this time. He used a mule kick, snapping the latch. The doors swung open. Councilman Shaw was standing by the fireplace. He wasn't shredding documents. He was burning them. A metal wastebasket was in flames, smoke curling up toward the high ceiling. Shaw, a man usually seen in tailored suits, was in his bathrobe, frantically feeding thick ledgers into the fire. "FBI, step away from the fire," Jay shouted. Shaw looked up, his eyes wild. "You can't come in here. I have immunity. I'm an elected official. You're under arrest for money laundering and racketeering." Jay rushed forward. Shaw tried to throw a black hard drive into the flames. Jay lunged. He didn't tackle the man. He tackled the evidence. Jay's gloved hand snatched the hard drive out of the air, inches from the fire. He felt the heat sear his wrist, but he held on. Pierce hit Shaw with a tackle that would have made an NFL highlight reel. The councilman hit the expensive Persian rug with a thud. The wind knocked out of him. "Hands behind your back. Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting," Shaw wheezed, his face pressed into the wool. "You tried to destroy evidence in front of federal agents," Pierce growled, cuffing him. "That's obstruction. Add years to the sentence." Jay stood up, clutching the hard drive. He looked at the burning bin. He grabbed a heavy vase of flowers from the desk and dumped the water into the bin. The fire hissed and died, leaving half-burnt papers soggy but legible. "Secure the scene," Jay breathed. his heart hammering. Get the fire department to check the chimney for updrafts of loose paper. I want every scrap of ash bagged. Minutes later, the front door opened again. Harlan Beck, still watching from the car, saw the impossible. Councilman Reginald Shaw, the man who controlled the police budget, the man Beck had idolized as the definition of success, was dragged out in handcuffs. He was weeping. He looked small, pathetic, and guilty. Shaw saw the police cruiser in the street. He saw Beck in the back of the FBI truck. "Beck!" Shaw screamed, his voice cracking. "You idiot! You brought them here. You let them write to me." Beck flinched as if slapped. Jay walked out behind the prisoner, holding the evidence bag containing the hard drive. He walked over to the Suburban where Beck was being held. He signaled the agent to open the door. The rush of cool air hit Beck's sweaty face. "You see that, Harlan?" Jay asked, pointing at the weeping councilman. Beck nodded dumbly. "That man has been laundering money for a major cartel for years," Jay said. "He's been poisoning the city with drug money, washing it through construction projects. We spent years building this case. We were waiting for the money drop to catch him red-handed." Jay leaned in, his eyes cold. "But because you wanted to play tough guy with a black man in a nice car, the courier got spooked. We missed the money. We almost lost the hard drive. You didn't protect this neighborhood, Harlan. You protected a monster, and you almost let him get away." Beck looked down at his hands, bound in plastic. The narrative in his head that he was the thin blue line, the protector, was shattering. He wasn't the hero. He was the clown who tripped the alarm. "I didn't know," Beck whispered. "That," Jay said, slamming the door, "is gonna be on your tombstone." The interrogation room at the FBI Chicago field office was a study in sensory deprivation. The walls were grey, soundproofing foam. The table was bolted to the floor. The air was frigid, kept intentionally cold to keep suspects uncomfortable and awake. Harlan Beck had been sitting there for hours. His handcuffs had been replaced with steel ones, chained to the ring on the table. He was thirsty. He needed to use the bathroom, but mostly he was terrified. The door opened. He expected his lawyer, Donovan Price. Instead, Agent Everett Cole walked in, followed by ASAC Gideon Vale. "No lawyer. Where is Price?" Beck demanded, his voice raspy. "I invoked my right to counsel." Jay sat down, placing a thick file on the metal table. "Mr. Price is currently busy." "Busy doing what?" "He's my lawyer." "Actually," Vale said, remaining standing, "Mr. Price represents the Fraternal Order of Police. He represents the union, and as of recently, the union has voted to revoke your membership and legal protection." Beck felt the blood drain from his face. "What? They can't do that." "They can," Jay said. "There is a clause in your contract regarding conduct unbecoming and criminal malfeasance. When the news broke that you were running a racial profiling ring on a private server, well, the union decided you were too radioactive to touch. They cut you loose, Harlan. You're on your own." Beck slumped. The system he had served, the blue wall he thought would always shield him, had just dropped him off a cliff to save itself. "I want a public defender," Beck whispered. "You'll get one," Jay said. "But first we're going to listen to a story. Your story." Jay opened the file. He pulled out photos, not of Beck, but of the chat logs from the laptop. "We cracked the encryption on the Blue Wall Discord server," Jay said. "It's ugly, Harlan. Really ugly. Jokes about beating suspects, competitions on who can write the most bogus tickets. But the worst part is the hierarchy. Jay tapped a photo of a user profile named Watchman. "This guy," Jay said. "Watchman. He's the ringleader. He tells you who to target. He gave you the order to light me up today." "Who is he?" Beck shook his head. I can't tell you." "Why not?" Vale asked. "Loyalty to the people who just fired your lawyer? To the people who are letting you take the fall for a federal civil rights violation?" "You don't understand," Beck said, his eyes tearing up. "If I talk, I'm a rat. I'm dead in prison. A cop in general population is bad. A snitch cop, I won't last a week." Jay leaned forward. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was dangerously soft. "Harlan, look at the math. You are facing a long sentence for the deprivation of rights, another for the gun enhancement, another for conspiracy. You are looking at decades. You will be an old man when you get out. You will die in prison anyway." Jay slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a proffer agreement," Jay said. "You talk. You tell us who Watchman is. You tell us every officer involved in this ring. In exchange, we recommend a reduced sentence in a minimum security federal camp. We put you in protective custody. You survive." Beck stared at the paper. It was a lifeline, but it required him to betray the only identity he had left. "I need to know I'm safe," Beck stammered. "You're only safe if you give us the head of the snake," Jay said. "Who is Watchman?" Beck closed his eyes. He thought about the barbecue at the precinct last summer. He thought about the man who had clapped him on the back and told him to keep the streets clean. The man who had given him the login to the server. "It's..." Beck's voice cracked. "It's Sergeant Thorne." Jay paused. "The chief's brother, the shift sergeant." "Yes," Beck wept. "And the chief knows. Chief Thorne is overlord in the chat. They run it together. They use the tickets and the arrests to juice the stats to get federal grants. It's all a game." The silence in the room was heavy. This was bigger than a few bad apples. The entire orchard was rotten. "Thorne," Jay said, not taking his eyes off Beck. "Get the warrant for the chief." Jay looked back at Beck. "You did the right thing, Harlan. Finally. Does this mean I can go home?" Beck asked, a pathetic hope in his eyes. Jay stood up and gathered the files. He looked at the man who had tried to ruin him. He felt a moment of pity, but it was fleeting. "No, Harlan," Jay said. "It means you don't die in prison, but you're never going home. Not to the life you had." Jay knocked on the door. "Guard, take him to booking." In the months that followed, the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was besieged by media vans. The headline on the scrolling ticker of the news vans read, "Oak Creek Police Scandal Sentencing Day." Special Agent Everett Cole stood on the steps, adjusting his tie. The wind off the lake was cold, but the sun was bright. Beside him stood Agent Nolan Pierce and ASAC Gideon Vale. Inside the courtroom, the final act of the drama had just played out. Harlan Beck stood before the judge. He looked much older. His mustache was gone, shaved off in county lockup. His suit was ill-fitting. He had lost significant weight from stress. The courtroom was packed. In the front row sat his ex-wife. She wasn't there to support him. She was there with her divorce attorney to ensure the lien on his pension was finalized. She wouldn't look at him. Judge Margaret Hale, a stern woman with zero tolerance for corruption, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Beck," she said, "you have cooperated with the government. Your testimony was instrumental in the indictment of former Chief Thorne and Sergeant Thorne, both of whom are now facing significant prison time. The court acknowledges this." Beck nodded, hope rising in his chest. maybe probation, maybe house arrest. However, the judge continued, her voice hardening like concrete, you were the spearhead of a culture of terror. You used your badge as a cudgel. You targeted Agent Cole not because of what he did, but because of who he was. You betrayed the public trust in the most visceral way possible. The judge looked at Jay, sitting in the prosecution box. Agent Cole, do you have a victim impact statement? Jay stood up. He walked to the podium. He didn't have notes. Your Honor, Jay said, I am a trained federal agent. When Mr. Bex assaulted me, I knew how to de-escalate. I knew the law. I had a team listening. Jay paused, looking directly at Beck. But I keep thinking about the man who sat in that car before me. The teenager driving home from school. The father going to the grocery store. They didn't have a wire. They didn't have a backup team. When they met Officer Beck, they had no voice. Today the system worked because I am part of the system. But justice shouldn't require a badge to work. Officer Beck didn't just break the law. He broke the promise that keeps this society from falling into chaos. He needs to serve as an example that the badge is a heavy weight, not a free pass. Jay sat down. The judge nodded. Harlan Beck, I sentence you to several years in federal prison, followed by supervised release. You are stripped of your pension. You are permanently barred from holding any position in law enforcement or security. Remand is immediate. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. No, Beck cried out as the marshals moved in. Please, I helped you. I helped you. The marshals didn't care. They spun him around, cuffing his hands behind his back. The same sound, click, click, that he had inflicted on Jay. As they walked him out the side door, Beck looked back. He locked eyes with Jay one last time. There was no anger in Jay's eyes, just a blank, professional indifference. Beck realized with a crushing finality that he wasn't a villain in Jay's story anymore. He was just paperwork. Outside the courthouse, Jay walked down the steps. The reporters swarmed. Agent Cole, how do you feel about the verdict? Is the FBI investigating other departments? Jay stopped at the microphones. He looked into the cameras. Justice was served today, Jay said. But let's be clear, this wasn't a victory. A police department was dismantled. A city councilman is in jail. A family was destroyed. This was a tragedy that could have been avoided with a few seconds of respect. That's the lesson. Respect the law. Respect the people. Or, eventually, the law will come for you. He stepped back. Pierce clapped him on the shoulder. Beer? Yes, Jay smiled. But you're buying. I'm technically still on duty until I file this final report. Deal. They walked away. Two men in suits disappearing into the city crowd. Behind them, the news screens flashed the mugshot of Harlan Beck, a man who had everything and lost it all in a matter of moments because he couldn't let go of his ego. The karma hadn't just hit, it had cleared the board. And that is how those few minutes of arrogance destroyed a lifetime of service. Harlan Beck thought he was the predator, but he failed to realize he was swimming in an ocean with much bigger sharks. He lost his job, his freedom, and his legacy, all because he judged a book by its cover and didn't bother to read the badge inside. It's a brutal reminder. In the age of cameras and accountability, the truth always has a way of coming out. Beck's blue wall of silence didn't protect him. It collapsed on top of him. What do you think? Did Beck deserve the sentence? Or should it have been harsher? considering he was part of a larger conspiracy? And would you have remained as calm as Agent Cole? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served, please like the video. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We post real-life inspired dramas regularly. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.